Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Simon Marciniak. I'm speaking to you from Wanstead, East London, which is where I live. I'm a lawyer working in East London. My specialism is housing law. I assist tenants and people with housing problems, and I've done that since I qualified in 2004. My workplace is not far from here. It's in Stratford, near the Olympic site. I suppose the first memory of my childhood is when I must have been about 2 years old. I remember going to my aunt's wedding, and I remember it was a Catholic wedding in Manchester, and I remember being particularly scared of a dog. There was a dog that was sort of around the area, and it's interesting because later I found out that it was also the day that my grandfather died. My grandfather died on the same day that my uncle got married, and I think that must have created an impression on me, even though I didn't understand what was going on. The fear of the dog must have been a reflection of the emotions on that day. So I think that is probably my earliest memory. There may be one or two earlier than that, but they're so fuzzy that I can't actually remember. But I would say that's my earliest memory. My parents were both Catholic, well, are still both Catholic, although they're less observant now than they used to be, I'd say. My mother went to a convent school, so very sort of strict upbringing, taught by nuns. My father also went to a Catholic school. In terms of family background, my father's father was Polish, so there's a strong Catholic background there. And on my mother's side, it's Irish, which again is Catholic. So they came together more or less from the same community. So there was a strong Catholic foundation to my life, I suppose you could say. It was weekly. We had to go to church, even when on holiday. It was church every Sunday, and every so often my mother made me go to confession. So I'd say once every 6 months she would send me to go on a Saturday morning to go and confess before the priest. Normally I couldn't think of what to say, so she prompted me to say, well, seek forgiveness for arguing with your brother or quarrelling with your brother and that sort of thing. So that's what I went and did. So I suppose by comparative standards it was pretty formal and strict. And of course I did the First Communion and Confirmation. And of course I was baptised. The First Communion was a particularly nice event for me because I was 7 years old, and I was invited to do a reading from the Bible, from the book of Samuel. That was quite nerve-wracking at the time, but it was nice. It was something I look on with a lot of fondness, because my speaking skills even at that age were thought highly of, and I was given the opportunity to do that. So it was a nice upbringing, I'd say. As I go into my late teenage years, my sort of resolve began to fade a bit. I wouldn't say I sort of went astray, but I particularly remember a pilgrimage that we went down to Lourdes, which is a site in the south of France, if you don't know it, where a lot of Catholic pilgrims go. And where the Virgin Mary was meant to have appeared to a girl there in the 19th century. And I remember being very disappointed by that, because it was basically it was people being exploited. It was just a commercial place, full of shops selling tacky items, and there wasn't much sanctity there, not much holiness, I would say. So I think from that point on, when I was about 16, I began to go to church less, and I wasn't as observant as I used to be. And then when I went to university, I was in Manchester during my college years, and then I went to university. And then I well, I then started, I mixed with religious people, but from an Anglican background. So I joined the chapel choir. I had quite musical abilities. So I joined the chapel choir and went every Sunday to sing there, which was nice because you don't really get that in Catholic services. Anglican services are much more interesting in terms of the musical side of it. So I started going to Anglican ceremonies when I was at university. And that lasted a couple of years. And then basically from that point on I stopped going to church completely. I sort of lost direction, I'd say, if you like. So by the end of university until for a few years I stopped going. So I think that was the sort of beginning of the end of my Christian life, if you like. Yeah, I often wonder myself why I sort of didn't stop believing. I mean, I never got to that point, I don't think, where I actually, stopped believing. I mean, I did have friends who, I was brought up with who were doubting similarly. I had one friend who's become a Quaker. I have another friend who used to say to me, what's all this chanting about? These people go to church every Sunday, and, they're chanting all these hymns, these prayers, and they don't really understand what it's about. It's like sort of repetition, and they don't really committed to it. And I sort of began to see the point of that. I began to sort of doubt whether there was any genuine point in going to church. So although I didn't stop believing, certainly that way of expressing it wasn't doing it for me. I would say that my main introduction to Islam, I'd had Muslim friends earlier than this at university, but only like peripherally, and I would say that it really started when I started work. I mentioned at the beginning, I work in law, and I was working with a lawyer from about 2003 onwards, who was Muslim, and we shared the same room. And gradually, after time, he'd pray on his own in the room, and then he would ask me permission whether it would be okay if he prayed in the same room as me during lunch hours. And I said, yeah, that's fine, no problem. So gradually, sort of like by osmosis, I was being exposed to these, to what he was doing and his behaviour, we did have a very good rapport, and eventually he presented me with the Quran and invited me to read this, and he pointed out to me that there's a chapter in there, Surah Maryam. He was of course aware it was a Catholic, and he suggested that I might like to read this to look at the Islamic view of Mary alayhi salam. So I did that. I suppose this was about 2007, 2007. I picked it up, read it, but it was very, very strange to read because it was so disjunctive, so it jumped from one thing to another. And I was expecting it to read a narrative like the Bible is, but it didn't do that. So it was a bit confusing initially to start with, but so I put it aside for the time being. But obviously I carried on talking to my friend, working with him, and then I picked it up again. Now, I suppose this is the point the penny dropped, I suppose, was about 2008, I'd say. In Christianity, you have something called the embarrassment factor. I don't know. I'm sure there's an expression in Arabic, but I don't know what it is. Basically, it says that in the Bible there are events which are so embarrassing or humiliating that they're unlikely to have been invented. So, for example, the examples that are often given are Peter's denial of Jesus after the arrest, according to the biblical account, and the fact that Jesus was crucified alongside two criminals is also given as an example. But that never convinced me, because there's an element of happy ever after to it. Peter becomes the first pope, and he's martyred later, and of course the crucifixion is followed by the resurrection in the Bible. So there's an element of righting of wrongs. So when I went back to the Quran, I read Surah Maryam again, and you have this account in the middle of it between Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and his father, and his attempts to convert him to turn him away from polytheism. And of course he's unsuccessful. The father kicks him out of the house, and that's the last, the last good thing we hear about his father. As far as we know, he never changed. So I read that and thought, well, hang on a minute, I can't really work out how that could have been made up. I mean, if a man was to make that sort of thing up, he would have either not put it in at all, or he would have, smoothed it over in some way. Because what the basic message is that if you are monotheistic, like Prophet Ibrahim was, it can even cause divisions in the family. Now, who in the right mind would want to say something like that? And similarly, you have the account of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and before he goes to Pharaoh, he makes the dua to make him more eloquent and to speak more naturally, because we know he had a speech defect. And who in the right mind would refer to a prophet's speech defects? It doesn't, make any sense for somebody to insert that deliberately if the idea is to convert people or make people think again. So it has like a paradoxical effect. It's a sort of contradiction, if you like. So I suppose from that point on, the penny began to drop for me. There was something more real about Islam than I'd previously thought. But it took me some time before I actually made the step. So this was 2007, 2008, and I eventually converted in middle of 2010. I had to sort of pretend I was Muslim, so to cut out the things that I was doing before that if I became Muslim I couldn't do, because I was sort of concerned that I may lapse, I may have not the willpower to see it through. But alhamdulillah, I managed to do the things that would normally be expected of me. In addition to that, I attended Arabic classes as well. That was in 2008. I attended Arabic classes, and I made very good progress with that. So that trained me in terms of reading the Quran and alhamdulillah, performing the salat. So that's, in a nutshell, how it all came about. So, I mean, the question is, why did I follow the path of the Ahlul Bayt? Well, I suppose the simple answer is it's where I felt. My friend was Shia. He had many Shia friends who he introduced me to, and that's where I ended up. Although, given what I've said earlier, the question is why didn't I think about Sunni Islam in any way? I mean, to give one example, I mean the prostration on the turba. I was doing that. I was performing my salat once in a Sunni mosque, and a brother came up to me and said, why are you doing it this way? What are you prostrating on there? And I didn't have the answers for him at the time, but he was being quite aggressive at the time, and he, suggesting I had some sort of fetish for this thing. But I was aware that there were hadith, which Sunni hadith, which referred to the turba, and I went back later and I found in Bukhari indeed there's a reference to prostrating on earth. So even in the Sunni literature, there is the methods of salat, which unfortunately a lot of them don't perform. So from my own studies, my own comparative research, I realised that the Ahlul Bayt was made more sense, I'd say. Between the time when I was learning about Islam and I converted, I was comparing the two and doing lots of research on the internet, again, it's just about looking at their own sources and seeing, well, there's hundreds of references to Imam Ali as the Imam and Badi al-Qum and that sort of. After I converted, I suppose I made a decision I wasn't going to make an announcement straight away, because I didn't feel comfortable with that. I just wanted to see how things went, just behave normally, because what I didn't want people to think was that I'd gone mad or I was doing something rash or irrational. I wanted to be able to tell people, yeah, actually I've converted now, and it actually happened some time ago, even if only a few months ago. I thought that would make it easier in terms of people getting used to it. But the reaction has been better than I could have hoped for, really. The first person I told was my youngest brother. I have two younger brothers. I sort of dropped a hint. It was around Christmas time, and he was thinking of making a Christmas pudding, or at least his partner was. And I said, well, don't put any alcohol in it, because I don't take that anymore. And then I explained why. And he said, oh, okay. Well, they said to me, well, we had in fact guessed that that's what you'd done, but I'm glad you've told us. So he had suspected that I'd taken that step for a while. So it was easy for them. They were happy with it and they welcomed it. After that, I told my mother, and I wouldn't say she was pleased, but she said, it's your decision. I think that's one of the things that's good about Western society in a way. It's a sort of very accepting culture, and people do decide to follow a particular path, even if I'd said become a Buddhist or a Hindu. I'm sure people have been fine with that, but it was quite easy for my mother to take. And my father was, he actually said he was impressed by it. He liked the fact that I'd made a solid commitment, even though that's not how I'd been brought up. He was happy with that choice. And I have made a distinct effort to improve. I wouldn't say there were bad relations with my parents, but they live in Manchester, I live in London, so it's not always easy for me to have the links with them that I'd like. So I always try and set time aside to spend a long period with them. I go away with my father on holidays. In fact, I'm going away with him to Jordan later this month. So that's the way I try and fulfill that obligation by spending time with them, even though I can't see them or even speak to them every week. And hopefully that way they can see that Islam has done me good, because I try and look after them more. The thing you'll always get is people instinctively going to be suspicious because of the negative influence about Islam. They say to me, oh, you're not going to be like that, or you're not going to behave in that particular way, in an extremist way, and that was one of the reasons that I sort of delayed it, if you like. I just wanted to make things appear as like business as usual, if you like. I hadn't changed psychologically as a person. I just had formed a different set of convictions and beliefs, I was just anxious as well. I didn't want to portray myself as an extremist. It's difficult in terms of not attending things like Christmas and going to Christmas meals and that sort of thing, but that's they see that's fine. They don't have a problem with that. But that's one thing I do slightly miss. That sort of social gathering is. Has been a bit of a change for me, I'd say, keeping away from those sorts of things. But I try and make up for it in other ways, like the ways I've just mentioned. After I converted, I didn't really expect any dramatic changes and didn't really want there to be. I just wanted, things to be as normal as possible. But I found that I think one thing I've certainly found that I've become a more responsible person since I converted. I've been more sure of my convictions. If somebody's, because I hold a senior position at work, if somebody's asked me a question or asked my advice about something, I've been more ready to give it with a sense of commitment, and I've been more sure of myself, I would say, and I can give answers to questions easier. So it's helped me sort of mature as an individual. I realise that it's only been 18 months, so nothing's going to happen overnight. But I would certainly say I have become more sure of myself. I've become a more certain individual since I converted. Well, I did my Tajweed classes, and I've tried to learn as much of the latter part as I can. So I've memorised many of the last 10, 15 surahs of the Quran, which is nice because then you can adapt your prayers according to which surah you feel like quoting. So I made a conscious decision to do that. Maybe I don't read as much as I'd like to. I'd like to sort of get into a habit of dedicating time aside, even if it's only a few times a week, to doing that, to learning more. I'm still reliant on the English, I would say. I haven't quite got to the stage where I'm confident reciting straight from the Arabic, but inshallah that will come. I would say, in terms of getting to know people through friends of friends, they've been extremely helpful. And they've fallen over backwards to help me sometimes. In terms, if you're asking me, if I've been to Friday prayers, if people come up to me and introduce themselves, that's not really happened. People keep themselves to themselves, I think, in that setting, and there's not much interaction in that. And similarly, at lectures I've been to at the Islamic Centre, people, you don't get people coming up and introducing themselves or wanting to find out about you. So it has been slow in that respect. But I wouldn't expect strangers to come up and want to inquire about you. People are people. They like to keep themselves to themselves. And if I had one wish, it would be to see a community outside that particular that centre of northwest London. Inshallah, one day that will happen. But I do taqleed, so I can ask a representative from the website. The one problem I have with it, I don't. Often my questions are quite complicated because I know, and I have a basic knowledge of a lot of things. But if you're asking complicated questions, because the representative's first language isn't necessarily English, you don't really get a sense that they've understood your question properly. So I've had to do sort of find out my sheikh, and even if through an interpreter, get the answer I wanted through that. But there are good resources out. People people are only too willing to help if they can, and you can send an email to so and so and so and so, and you get an answer back quite quickly. There's a lot of excellent YouTube resources, and even on the site itself, you can version of iPlayer now, haven't you? So you can watch things. You can watch things again. So if you've missed things, so I do particularly enjoy watching the Q&A, because there's always something I didn't know beforehand, which I found out from watching the Sunday evening shows. So that's a particular valuable source of information. In terms of Islamic pilgrimages, I've done two so far. One I don't count because it sort of happened by accident before I converted. We went to Lebanon, and we went on my friend and I, we went on a bus trip to Baalbek, not realising that there was a shrine to the daughter of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Khawla. There's a shrine to her there, and we found it purely by accident, and that was a particularly lovely experience because nobody was there. It was very quiet, very secluded, very and there was a very sort of great feeling of being there. That was in the February before I converted that I was there. After I converted, I went on a trip on my own to Syria, to Damascus, and I visited two places, the shrine, or three places actually. There's the antechamber of the Umayyad Mosque where Imam Hussein's head, alayhi salam, was taken, and then to the Sayyidah Ruqayya. She has a shrine there. I did ziyarat to that, and then to Sayyidah Zainab, just outside the city. Those were all wonderful experiences. Sayyidah Zainab was interesting because I thought I would go when Friday prayers was on, and there were a whole load of people lined up. I took my place in the queue, and then nothing happened. There was no sort of khutbah, no prayers or anything, but the people were sort of arrayed there waiting, and nothing happened. I found it a bit too crowded, to be honest. I prefer the experience at this Lady Khawla's shrine. When I went on that Friday to Sayyidah Zainab, there was less sense of privacy, if you like, because I particularly enjoy the sense of communion through privacy. So I mean, I don't really know how I'd react if I went on Hajj, because obviously that's another experience altogether. But that's in front of me. So those are the three experiences I've had pilgrimage-wise. I've yet to go to Iraq. That's another adventure in the future, inshallah. There have been occasions since I converted when I've felt a sense of desperation. For example, if I had a very difficult case at work, I haven't seen a solution, I've not been able to find a solution, and I prayed for one. I wouldn't say I've directed my prayers through a particular person. Obviously, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, I say that repeatedly, but I wouldn't say I relied on a particular person for that. I mean, I haven't got the knowledge, so I don't know yet the procedure, I suppose you could say, for doing that. So my prayers are quite simple, if you like, at the moment. But I've been amazed at how solutions have been found to difficult problems at work that I couldn't find, whether it's through a third-party intervention or some other event happening in a case to change it completely. So that's been particularly important for me to have that to rely on. But in terms of the Ahlul Bayt, the example of the life of Imam Ali will always astound you. The things he said, his sayings are really the things we can barely live up to in our daily lives. But inshallah, we try.
Du'as, have you attended Du'a Kumail maybe? Have you Du'a Kumail?
I've attended it. My Shahada occurred on a Du'a Kumail evening. I attended Du'a Kumail, and then there was a talk, and then my Shahada followed that. Another point I was going to make about why I was why there was I took my time. There were quite a few aspects of Islam that I decided I couldn't make full sense of. So, for example, the way of performing wudu, I couldn't quite. I tried to rationalise as much as I can. So I saw the health benefits of fasting, even performing prayers and so on. But things like wudu, I couldn't quite understand why things were done in a particular way, and nobody could really explain to me, and nothing had read and explained it to me in a way I could make sense of. So in a sense, when I took my shahada, it was like a leap of faith. I said, okay, I'll do it, and inshallah the solution will come later. Because what I wanted to avoid was doing things for the sake of it in a dogmatic way. I wanted to avoid that. The answer to that particular problem came when I went to the opticians, because before my conversion I had a few problems with my eyes, build up of pollution, which is living from inner city areas, you build up pollution in your eyes, and my optician advised me to bathe my eyes in soap, baby soap, which I hadn't been doing. But when I went to the optician shortly after I converted, she said, "Oh, actually, it's all cleared up. Have you been applying the oil like I suggest?" I said, "No, I haven't." Well, I haven't regularly. I sort of told a white lie. I said, "Well, actually, yes, I have, but I've been looking after my eyes," I think I said. So, but then I thought, well, it must be because of the way we'll do it. It must be, you know, cleansing that particular part of my body in a positive way. So, you know, the answer came afterwards, if you like. So, you know, I think it's one of the reasons it's important to have faith. You can't understand everything, but inshallah, through practice, the solution comes later. I think one of the criticisms you have of any religions, Islam, whatever it is, you know, it's faith-based. If you listen to, I don't know, Richard Dawkins or one of these people, they want to eliminate faith. They want everything to be based on reason and understanding. But, you know, you have to accept that there are lots of things you can't grasp, and, you know, why people, why things are done in a certain way. And I think, you know, it's critical to have faith and to do things based on well, once you have the foundations, then the rest follows, I think. Even if you don't understand what the rest is at the time, the solution comes later.